From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and ahead today, a seemingly out-of-season visit from K-State's Jeff Whitworth as he responds to questions coming in from wheat growers right now about winter grain mite and chinch bug activity in their stands currently, and if they're cause for treatment even here in early winter. Also today, K-State's A.J. Sharda will talk about the new precision agriculture technologies that caught his attention as he attended Agritechnica, the world's largest farm equipment exhibition in Germany a couple of weeks ago. He highlights in particular the new holistic field data management services that are now becoming available to producers. And later on, with Stop, Look, and Listen, K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven here on Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Yes, we're rapidly entering true winter conditions here in Kansas now. However, there have been a few observations on insect activity, believe it or not, in our winter wheat stands around Kansas. And responding to those with some thoughts is Jeff Whitworth. He's a crop entomologist with K-State Research and Extension, as you know. And you're attributing this to the recent warmer weather we've had that may have stirred up some insect activity in wheat, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me this time of year. It is kind of a strange time of year to talk about crop pests, but I have received several calls in the last 2 or 3 weeks relative to wheat pests, and mainly some of the questions concern wintergrain mites. And, this time of year, that's one of our last pests going into the fall in the wheat crop is the wintergrain mite. And in most years, the wintergrain mites are out and very active just before the wheat goes into dormancy. But this year, we've had such a nice, long, warm fall. I say that. A lot of people don't like the nice, warm, long falls, but we have had quite a bit of warm temperatures, and that has allowed a lot of the pests to be active longer than usual. And so this has kind of created some concern for some of the guys that are out looking in the wheat. First of all, we've seen a lot of lady beetle activity in the wheat, and I'd like to mention that's probably good because up till about Halloween, we were seeing quite a few aphids come into the state, and a lot of them were the bird cherry oat aphid and green bugs, and these lady beetles will help control those pests. And as you know, those pests are the ones that can vector barley yellow dwarf to wheat. So, and we're seeing a lot of lady beetles as the temperatures get warm, they become active because they overwinter as adults. So just to get that out. Also, I've gotten several calls about wintergrain mites. Like I said, usually we get calls about wintergrain mites in the fall because they feed anytime the temperatures, between 40 and 65 degrees, really. That's why they're called wintergrain mites. They like the cool weather. Mm-hmm. So the eggs hatch in, early fall or mid-fall, and then the mites are in the soil and they start feeding on the wheat as the temperatures cool down. They can cause concern because the mites are very small. To me, they're really uniquely colored. They're dark body with the red legs and a red spot. You generally have to have some sort of magnification to see them. Right. But they're a neat-looking little mite. But they can build up really in the hundreds per leaf or per tiller at least. And so they can cause some silvering on the wheat. The mite will actually feed on individual cells within the plant, and as they remove the chlorophyll out of the plant, it leaves it kind of a brownish or silvery color. So a lot of times that's kind of indicative of wintergrain mite feeding. So that kind of gets the guys concerned when they see that.
This is damage to the foliage alone, though,
yes,
right?
Yes. But once the plant goes into dormancy, that's really not going to affect the plant. And generally at that time, the mites also go into hibernation or estivation or whatever you want to call it. because they will go down into the soil and then they don't feed. And the calls I've gotten this week, they're finding mites up on the foliage, and they're wanting to know if that's actually going to cause a problem. But if the wheat's in dormancy, it really shouldn't cause a problem. As long as it has a good root system, and now that could be questionable because we've had a lot of dry weather, but there's nothing you can do about that, and the mites should not affect that. So the mites should be in the soil or in the residue or the leaf litter or whatever down around the plants, and they should stay that way. Now, if it does warm up, they may crawl up on the plant, but they don't like sunlight either, so it's going to be in a cloudy day, or if you're out at night with a flashlight, you can see them. But really, they're not going to cause a problem. And with the coming, apparently predicted cold weather, they should all cease. They should just be in the soil. And they should stay down there until, the wheat breaks dormancy. Once that happens, that's when I would really be concerned about it. I really don't think it's worth treating them now because, like I said, the plants are in dormancy. You're really not going to hurt the foliage. And the cold weather is not going to allow the insecticide to do, or the miticide to do very well as far as killing the mites. And they're going to be in the soil anyway. So, but once it breaks dormancy, whenever that is, late February, March, April, that's when you need to watch, especially if we don't get good moisture, because those areas where you see all the wintergreen mites now, they're not going to go away. They'll probably be out there in the spring, and if we don't have good moisture, they can start feeding on those individual cells, and they can retard or slow down the actual growth of the wheat in the spring. And that's when you need to really get out and pay attention and start worrying about it.
So with respect to wintergrain mite, you would at least suggest producers note, even record, where they have observed their feeding right now in anticipation of their return this spring.
Exactly. Also, I've been getting some calls about chinch bugs. Okay. Chinch bugs also, they overwinter this time of year, and generally they're in bunch grasses or in residue someplace underneath where they don't feed from about mid-October until whenever, late February, March, April in the spring, whenever the weather's conducive, and the plants break dormancy so that there's something to feed on. Again, the mites, they suck the juice out of the plant. So do chinch bugs. So as long as the plants are in dormancy, the chinch bugs being in the field and feeding on the plants really has no effect on the plant. And they can be, as long as the temperatures are over 60 degrees, they can be active out there just like the lady beetles or the mites or anything else. But that doesn't mean they're actually causing a problem. I know they've caused some concern in the last week or so. But again, as the temperatures cool down and go back into more what we consider to be average winter temperatures, the chinch bugs should go back into hibernation, and they should not be a problem either, again, until spring. But as you just said, note where you saw wintergrain mites, note where you saw the chinch bugs now, and again, if we don't get adequate moisture over the winter or into the spring, those are the areas where you're probably going to see the wheat have a hard time growing or keeping up, because those plants are going to be losing moisture due to the wintergrain mites or the chinch bugs feeding on them.
So really, when we get to the latter part of February is when you want to start paying more attention then, or renewed attention here.
Yes, whenever that crop breaks dormancy, and it happens at different times in different places in the state, but chinch bugs are in this past year and last year, in 2016, 2017, we've seen a lot of chinch bugs in sorghum and in corn, and they move from the corn or sorghum. They generally move into the wheat in the fall once the wheat's planted, and then they usually move from the wheat into some overwintering site. But if there's a lot of no-till or residue in the wheat, they can stay right in there and overwinter, and that's the way they're closer to that when that wheat comes out of dormancy, like I said, whenever it is in February or April. So be sure and note those places so you can check those again in the spring, like you were saying.
Very good. As far as a general outlook on all wheat insects for this coming year, these incidents may be a precursor of what's ahead, but it really won't be clear until we get into the March-April period as to other pests that might check in, right?
That's exactly right. And you know what? Adequate moisture will help a lot. If we get some good moisture, snow or rain or whatever it is over the winter, or especially going into the late winter, early spring, that will help these plants overcome a lot of insect damage, especially coming out of the winter, because generally the populations take that time to build up. So there's usually a little lag time. If we can get some good growing conditions early on, the wheat and alfalfa, if you're talking alfalfa, can get a little bit ahead of some of the crop pests before they get established. So we're just better off that way.
Well, moisture would cure a host of ills for wheat, for alfalfa stands, perennial stands of many kinds. So, Jeff, we appreciate the word on these, and the positive is that these do not merit treatment at this point, but they do merit monitoring as we get into the growing season renewed here in a couple of months. And we appreciate your time, as always. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Eric.
Along with this, talking about winter grain mite and chinch bug activity that has been spotted around Kansas wheat fields of late, and whether growers need to respond with management of those pests. That's Jeff Whitworth. He's a crop entomologist, K-State Research and Extension. While we've a second here, it's worth mentioning that one of the most popular publications that K-State Research and Extension makes available to the public, and in this case to agricultural producers, the Comprehensive Guide on Insects in Kansas. This is a collaboration with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, which in tandem with K-State Research and Extension have put together a 500-page guide illustrated with 920 photographs of the common insects we see in Kansas, the culmination of over a century of research and observations on insects in the state. It's a really handy reference to have around as you go about your crop scouting or otherwise conduct insect pest identification. To find out how to obtain insects in Kansas, go to ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. We'll be back after this. You're tuned to Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Agriculture Today returns now here on the K-State Radio Network. Also returning to the university, our guest, who is just back from what is an enormous agricultural technology conference in Europe each year. It's called Agritechnica. It was held this time around in Hanover, Germany. A.J. Sharda is with us, Research and Extension Precision Agriculture Engineer at Kansas State University, and he was not only attending but participating in this conference with a couple of presentations. Give us a bit of background on this big show. It's a wide swath of technology on display there, you say, A.J.
Absolutely, Eric. I think this is the world's largest ag machinery show. A lot of technology innovation usually is unveiled during the Agritechnica, and there are halls after halls dedicated to individual technology. Like if you talk about liquid application, there's a whole hall where you can just roam around and find every single manufacturer from around the world who is manufacturing liquid application technology like nozzles and PWMs, technology aspects and booms. And there were full hall of sprayers from different companies. Probably there are 8 to 9 planters, and so everything from production side to sensors to systems to automation to robotics, UAVs, grain handling, feed.
You were in your element, weren't you?
It was all over the place.
What we wanted to do is bring you by to share a few things that you observed, some of the emerging technologies, some intriguing developments that might be more front and center in the immediate years ahead. One of these, you say, A.J., was what you've termed end-to-end informational services that some providers are offering. You might explain.
Yes, so we have seen a lot of movement around where more and more companies are coming forward in terms of providing ag solutions for production management side. Like when we went to Germany in 2015, there were lots of companies who were there who were in the area or industry of manufacturing UAVs. This year we had only handful. Everybody was consolidating, making those systems more plug and play, easy to use by the consumers. They can integrate sensing technologies better, and they are easy to operate, automated, and all that. But on the flip side, we saw lots and lots of companies who are providing some holistic solutions for smart agriculture perspective. From my own observation, everything falls in the 5 broad categories. Soil. There is an aspect of environment. There's an aspect of crop health or status. There is an aspect of product and machinery. So if you see any of those companies, probably I visited like 7 or 8 of those companies in one hall, but they are taking data from soil health, topography, texture. They are monitoring the health of the plant, leaf area and status and vigor. They are looking at environmental factors, the rainfall, temperature, humidity, the wind speed directions, and how the wind, the weather pattern is going to be. And they are looking at what product you want to apply. Because if you want to apply a certain product, then it has to pan out in terms of what's the crop status, what's the soil status, what does the environment tells me. It is good to go out, apply a certain chemical or a fertilizer, or yes or no. And then the aspect of machine, what technology you want to use, everything from machine efficiency to fuel to logistics to telematics to data transfer to the cloud and all that. So everything happens all together. Everything flows into one composite system. So there is one platform. So every aspect of data is flowing into that cloud service. Okay. And there are lots of, analytics and models and, what to do and how to do is in there. So all the decision making happens on the cloud itself. And then the output in terms of prescriptions, product selection, timing of application and, or machinery movement, everything goes out of it.
So this would be something that a crop consultant, for instance, or the individual producer, if they're so inclined, could potentially lean on and come up with more precise solutions on how to manage crop inputs, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. I think it was all about having as much information as possible about all 5 things we talk about. If you look from a perspective of producer, he has to manage the fleet and purchase products and all the logistics of running around, and the manpower is limited, and there is family to take care of and do other things in life. So what all an individual can do. But on the flip side, since it was the first year, we need expertise from lots of different experts to make this engine move, because an expert on crop, an expert on soil, an expert on weather, an expert on machinery and product selection, everybody is needed on that part. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how these solutions evolve. Like, for a quick example, I stopped at one of the booths, and what he was showing me that he can go to any field. He was asking me, how far behind you want to go in time to pick up a satellite imagery. So we picked up a satellite imagery, which so it was in front of me. Now he was asking, what do you want to do? Say, for example, we want to do a certain type of fertilizer. So every possible fertilizer application, which is already there in the database, then they pick up that, and then based on the product they picked up, the map showed what kind of a variability existed in that field and how they apply. And then the weather was brought in. They say, oh no, probably the next 2 or 3 days are not good. So it was very interesting to see how everything has been integrated. But now I think over the next few years we'll see how good those solutions are. And I think if people buy into these services, and more experience these companies will have in terms of iterating their algorithms and how to work. And you have Dr. Terry Griffin on your show a number of times. There's a lot to data and privacy in our part of the world. But if we want to advance some of these things, somebody needs a lot of data to look at and see the successes and failures and find a best possible solution forward.
But the template is out there, and these services may become more commonplace in a relative short period of time.
Yes.
Time will tell, of course, on that.
Yes.
Of course, there are any number of other things that probably were being demonstrated at this show. We haven't time to cover everything today. You're noting there, again, aren't any major revolutions, but there are sophistications of existing technology that continue to happen. That's really where the industry is right now.
Absolutely. You see from planters, lots of companies who have electric seed meters, downforce, mostly hydraulic downforce aspect of it. So automation from that side, better solutions, better algorithms. Same thing from liquid application, like we have more pulse width modulation technology, what we have seen in the past. In Europe, we have bank of nozzles. It can be a bank of 2 nozzles or bank of 4 nozzles. Every nozzle is designed to spray for a certain speed range. So we move from a very small orifice to a bigger orifice so that as speed increases, we can move to a bigger orifice and still keep applying at the same pressure, but we can output more product to match the speed and the application rates. Same thing with combine, lots of good solutions. There was a brand new combine which was unveiled by Agco. We don't have a lot of time to discuss that. And then so many other things. I'm talking more about from machine systems and precision ag perspective, but there was a spreader or a sprayer which has 16 wheels, 8 large wheels, and huge, humongous machines to cover some of the areas. So a lot of sensor companies and automation, and Dr. Randy Taylor out of Oklahoma State, they do a lot of work with efficiencies of machine operation. So we saw a company who was giving a solution this year where you can plug a little gadget into the tractor or implement bus. It'll start to put time you have spent on the road, time you have spent on turning, time you have spent on driving, and start differentiating, and you get a much better feel of the actual efficiencies of machines. So these kind of very unique solutions are, I think, groundbreaking, which can help producers who want to understand what is going on in their large operations. It can go beyond the research side of it, and people can start to understand what's happening with a certain machine implement combination or machine implement operator combination. So I think we will learn quite a bit, and buckle up for a lot of data utilization in future.
Well, the advances are constantly fascinating, and once more they are on full display at this event in Germany recently. So thanks for sharing a few of your reflections on what stood out to you, AJ, as you were attending this here a couple of weeks back, and we always appreciate your time. Probably we'll be discussing some of these concepts with you directly in the future.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much.
Precision agricultural engineer with K-State Research and Extension, A.J. Sharda, with us, who attended and spoke at the Agritechnica Farm Machinery Show in Hanover, Germany recently, the largest farm equipment show in the world. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back here on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, continuing on now with today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. A new USDA report shows that larger farms with higher household incomes have increasingly seen more in federal commodity payments as farms in the U.S. have consolidated. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa told agricultural journalists yesterday that in the wake of that information, he plans to use the next farm bill to push for further changes to that trend, saying that he wants a limit on what a single farm entity can get under all the farm programs. Since federal agencies are expected to do more with fewer dollars ahead, Grassley said that he believes other lawmakers may get on board with limiting federal commodity payments in some way. Debate on the next farm bill is expected to get rolling in 2018. Last June, Grassley asked the Government Accountability Office to review the effectiveness of what he calls the modest reforms to the so-called actively engaged rule in the 2014 Farm Bill as it pertains to determining farm program eligibility. Now, both chambers of Congress approved reforms to the actively engaged rule in the 14 Farm Bill that would have limited non-farming managers to one per farm entity. In 2013, the GAO found that the USDA rules make it difficult to track whether farmers are following the actively engaged rule. And in April of last year, Grassley introduced the Farm Payment Loophole Elimination Act. That bill eliminated from the 14 Farm Bill language that allowed for non-farmers who happen to be family members but aren't involved in the work or management of the farm or own the farmland to receive farm subsidy payments. Now, last month, the USDA's Economic Research Service released this evaluation of commodity program payments. The ERS found the composition of direct financial support has shifted. It said that falling crop prices in 2015 led to reduced household incomes on U.S. farms. Total agricultural production shifted to larger farms, along with commodity program payments and insurance indemnities between the years 1991 and 2015. They found that large farms with gross cash farm income before expenses of $1 million or more increased their share of agricultural production from 23% to 41%. The payments also shifted to farms with higher household incomes, mainly because larger farms tend to be operated by people with higher household incomes. In 1991, farms operated by households with incomes above $60,000 received half of commodity program payments. In 2015, half of those payments went to households with incomes above $146,000, according to the USDA. And the USDA says conservation program payments, according to this study, shifted to higher income households as well. In 1991, half of the land retirement payments to producers for retiring environmentally sensitive farmland from production went to households with incomes no higher than $54,000. By 2015, the median value had risen to $99,000, according to the Economic Research Service. The USDA's Census of Agriculture takes place every 5 years, with the latest questionnaires now arriving in farmers' mailboxes any day now. Here's more on that from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
If you're a farmer or an ag producer, it's that time of year. Time for the holidays, yes, but also time for something that takes place only once every 5 years.
Hi, I'm Sonny Perdue. Over the next few weeks, farmers and ranchers will receive their 2017 Census of Agriculture questionnaire.
The Census of Agriculture is USDA's largest data collection effort. It aims for a comprehensive picture of American agriculture and provides some of the most widely used statistics in the industry.
I'm asking you to do your part for American agriculture. Help us show the nation the value and importance of agriculture. Respond to the Census of Agriculture now.
Producers can respond to the census by mail or with an updated online questionnaire, which makes responding easier than ever. The responses are due by February 5th, 2018. This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
In other headlines on this Wednesday, Monsanto asked a judge yesterday to prevent Arkansas lawmakers from banning the use of a herbicide that farmers in several states say have drifted onto their crops and caused widespread damage. The agribusiness asked the Pulaski County judge to issue a preliminary injunction preventing that state from banning dicamba's use. while the company challenges a prohibition approved by the Arkansas Plant Board last month. That board's proposal, which would ban dicamba's use from April the 16th through October the 31st, is scheduled to go before a legislative committee there next week. The company also wants the judge to block enforcement of a previous rule restricting dicamba use. A spokesperson for the Arkansas State Agriculture Department declined to comment on Monsanto's request. Dicamba has been, of course, around for decades, but problems arose over the past couple of years as producers began to use it on soybean and cotton fields, which were planted to new seed engineering to be resistant to the herbicide. The chemical has shown to at times settle off target on neighboring fields. The state earlier this year approved a temporary ban on the herbicide's sale and use and has received nearly 1,000 complaints about dicamba this year. Now, farmers have also complained about dicamba causing damage to their crops in other states, including Missouri, North Dakota, Tennessee, among others. The EPA, back in October, announced a deal with Monsanto and two other makers of dicamba, BASF and DuPont, for new voluntary restrictions on the herbicide's use. And on the trade front, evidence of injury to the U.S. biodiesel industry from imports of biodiesel from Argentina and Indonesia is now enough for the U.S. International Trade Commission to make affirmative determinations in its final phase of anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigations into those products. Given the affirmative determinations, that commission says that the U.S. Department of Commerce will now be issuing countervailing duty orders on imports of biodiesel from both Argentina and Indonesia. The commission will make its final report on their investigation public on January the 11th. And Canada has begun an initial effort to create a new trade agreement with China, according to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in a statement that was released by the Canadian government yesterday. This proposed free trade agreement was one of the main topics when Trudeau met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on Monday in Beijing. However, no official statement was made regarding the beginning of the talks about a new trade agreement. Now, a Canada-China trade agreement would likely take years to unfold. The China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, for instance, came into force after a decade of talks. That's a look at today's top stories from the agricultural news page. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back with this week's Stop, Look, and Listen in a few moments here on the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen. This is our state, Kansas.
It shook its feathers, fluffing them, and settled down.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
Walking outside at early dusk, the big owl swooped silently overhead and landed on the branch just above the square woodpile. I watched him land and then lift his feet to turn around. He turned around and faced me with his two big yellow ringed eyes. He, or she, was a beautiful specimen. It shook its feathers, fluffing them, and settled down. It was watching me intently. I had not been that close to an owl for a long time. I had listened to the calls, a hoo, hoo, hoo. This, too, was a hoot owl, or better said, a great horned owl. As it sat there watching me, the two small horns lay down, making the head even more squaring than it is. To see the big bird so close up on my hill made me very happy. It gave me what I've often talked about, a feeling of outdoors, which of course is nothing like the big parks, the public lands, the state or national parks, which are ours to roam. But beautiful as they are for many of us not close by. They do not give us daily contact with some things larger than life, close by our homes. Just the other day I read an article by Jeffrey Hancock in the local paper in which he describes his feelings and need to roam and how much he enjoys the outdoors. He speaks and describes his experiences as well as his need to sense the outdoors on our vast public lands. Then he describes an experience he has on the nature trail which winds and circles Manhattan. As he walks along, he fully realizes he's not walking the great outdoors where nature is nature with the big N. He writes, "For a moment it was not about where I was. It was what I was experiencing and noticing with such a high level of detail. For a moment my hunt was complete. I had found nature. I had found that all things around me were alive. It was quiet, and I was alone." And then he continues and writes, "I was factually surrounded by houses, but emotionally I was miles from civilization. I had found the nature I was looking for. I was on my public lands." And that experience is what I've talked about whenever I raise the question of our communities being connected through parks, outdoor spaces close to town, or even our backyards as well as front and side yards, creating landscapes which together make habitats for animals, birds, and us. So when the tree branch along the trail on the hill behind the house was chosen by the great horned owl as his perch, I was thrilled. Even more so when he turned around and looked at me, and I looked at him. He or she was beautiful. I know the head can turn 270 degrees, and it flies silently on its large wings, surprising its prey. I wondered if settling on the branch above the woodpile it had dinner on its mind, because I know mice and a pack rat are living in the woodpile. Its hearing and eyesight are exceptional. Some owls with individual ears in slightly higher or lower places are experts in hearing their prey and locating it to swoop down and catch it. With territory needs up to 2 square miles, my 4 acres and adjoining property of trees and open woods are enough. That must be why I can hear the calling in the evenings or early mornings from their chosen perches. It is that call, the hoo, 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 and the fact that we looked at each other from so close up that thrills me and gives me the feeling of space. With my sighting of the bird, I now wonder where the nest might be. They nest early, sometimes in January, and start laying eggs. Their nests are simple. I have no owl nest box, but I do have a large dead hollow tree. However, no droppings there. They will use old nests of hogs or squirrels. Maintenance is very simple. There's not much nest improvement. I wonder if they locate a well-situated squirrel's nest, if they then try to capture and prey on that squirrel. There may be up to 3 or 4 eggs in a nest where plenty of food is available. It takes around 30 days for the eggs to incubate, the female doing most of the sitting. At dusk, the male may come in and take over for a while. I'm going to see if by chance we do have the nesting place on our property. If it is there, it'll be fun to watch. I'm sure it may be more fun than studying the pair of vultures that had a nest in the old pony stable. The young owls leave the nest by the 8th week, if not before. They will perch on nearby branches, like the yearling deer shyly moving through the undergrowth, or the coyote crossing the lawn, or leaving scat on the trail. It's proof one does not need the large acreage to have outdoor experiences. I hope my owl chooses to come back, and if it does, we will talk some more. I've lots of questions, but maybe I should just listen, as the old rhyme suggests. A wise old owl sat in an oak, and the more he said, the less he spoke. And the less he spoke, the more he heard. Why can't we all be like that wise old bird?
Gus van der Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas. That's our time for today. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we'll be back this same time tomorrow, and hope you will as well. Until then, Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.